Welcome back to another episode of the Prosperity Playbook. We have a repeat guest here, and I think you're going to be excited about that. So, my friend Tyler Bergquist is here with me again today. And the last time he was here, we talked about like kind of operating on a higher level as far as your business and your life and all of the things. And what I'd wanted him to talk about before was his history around addiction and some family history. He's recently adopted his nephew, and he wasn't ready to do that yet. And so I respected that. And he called me a couple days ago and said, "Hey, I'm ready to do this." So here we are. And I hope that you find a lot of value in this. And I'm just going to start by kicking it over to Tyler and tell us your story, man.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, again, I'm on here because I think these things add value.
Yeah.
I think especially with, things that you struggle with personally, addiction is a huge one. It has a way of isolating you, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think that there is a lot of power in finding, some thread, commonality. You may not, have the same background as me or the same story or whatever, but there's threads in there that, I have certainly, sought this out myself, and seek, you get kind of empowered and get a little bit of a belief card, if you will, if you're trying to make some extreme changes.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's the whole goal of this podcast is like, they don't teach you about this stuff in school, like not on the level that we're going to talk today. And I think a lot of times it's taboo conversations or things that people aren't willing to bring up. And I love that you're willing to kind of break the stigma around that, because I think there's so many people out there that are fighting addiction that are hiding in shame, or they aren't talking to people, they're not getting help, or maybe they're even in denial around it. And so yeah, that's my goal is to share your story and your successes around that, and hopefully help a lot of other people too.
Yeah. I guess there's always, beginning to the story and things like that. And, I grew up in a abusive alcoholic home. There's literally never been a single day, unless he was in jail, that I've seen my father sober.
Wow.
In my entire life. I'm 40 years old.
Wow.
And that's, he aggressively made choices to, do what he did and live how he lived. And unfortunately, that runs downhill. And I absolutely believe that, there's kind of a genetic, predisposition as to, how you respond or react to things, as you grow up.
Absolutely.
Having addiction issues and stuff like that. It's kind of wired in.
Yeah.
I definitely was an alcoholic, like out the womb. I think the first time that I drank, I was like, yep, that's not healthy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How old were you?
12, 10,
Yeah.
10, 12, something like that, and that was the norm. I mean, there was never like milk in the fridge, but there was beer. So I was like, oh yeah. You ever had Beerios?
I have not.
Yeah. I was like, well, this might spice it up a little bit more than water in my cereal, but not a good experiment.
Okay. Noted.
But yeah, so, that's what I grew up with. That's what I like kind of noticed was normal.
Okay.
And I didn't know any different, obviously, until like middle school, where you kind of like, you branch out, you start to like have friends where you go over to their house, you have sleepovers. And I would go over to these like well put together homes, and I'd be like, this is different.
Yeah, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, totally. I'm like, wow, these people seem to actually like each other, and they hang out, there doesn't seem like there's too much stress or yelling or whatever. So there was like I started to kind of be aware of like how much of a junk show it was. So like when that's all that I mean, I remember, parents got divorced when I was in like into 6th grade, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I kind of pieced out and lived with my grandma about an hour away from my school for the first year, because it was just so chaotic. And I was just like, whatever, I kind of checked out and just kind of, there was a lot of infighting, and like this person's supposed to live with this person and stuff like that. And it was really messy. And so I kind of pieced out, lived with my grandma for a year. My mom, and this was in northern Wisconsin. My mom decided to take her and my youngest brother and kind of move like totally down south. She had some connections where she could move away from the area and kind of get a new start for herself.
Okay.
But I was like established in school, you know, even though things were super chaotic, I was like the star of the basketball team that, you know, like traveled all over the state and things like that.
There
And
was some good stuff.
yeah, there was some good stuff, you know, and I think for me, that's kind of a prelude to later. That time in sports and having some coaches that like I look back and I'm like, people knew kind of there was some stuff going on in my life, right? And I had some coaches that paid some extra attention to me and helped me a ton.
That's amazing.
You know, through the vehicle of basketball, right?
Yeah.
And so I did all of that, got through seventh grade year, you know, like maintained grades. But my mom had moved down south. And I was like, I don't want to leave, you know, all of these people that I've been going to school with, like, you know, since it was like second or third grade. And that was like our place. That was my comfort zone. You know, I had all my friends. I had the basketball thing going on. And so I was like, well, I don't want to leave. So I chose to stay with my dad because he had gotten back out of jail. And, you know, you get the like, I'm going to change,
yes,
you know,
Yep.
yeah, I'm going to change. It's going to be different, you know, and he was out for 2 days and it was pretty much same rhythm. And then so it was like, it was only about a month. It was sometime in October. He got another DUI and went to jail. I spent my from October all the way through June unsupervised. I had no parents. I held a part-time job. I went to school. I was in basketball, bought my own food. My grandma kind of paid the rent from afar. And that was kind of my life.
In middle school.
Eighth grade.
Wow.
No, and nobody really knew, you know, parent, counselor, teachers or whatever. I just showed up and was like, well, Tyler's a little tired, but you know, he's here, so we'll give him a break. But I kind of held it, you know.
Wow.
I did well that year, well enough, even though my older brother kind of made our house like the high school kegger party house. So,
Sure.
So I still, you know, maintained good grades in basketball and was doing keg stands on a Thursday, you
Absolutely,
know.
yeah.
Being 13, 14, whatever that was. And so pretty strange, you know, but like under stress and like extreme, you know, pressure or whatever, I held it together. But then, you know, the end of the year, it was like, okay, you know, you're going to have to move down south. And at that point, like, you know, my mom was a much safer person and, you know, it was a much healthier environment and things like that. You know, quite a degree different than what I was dealing with, obviously.
Nice.
But I got down there, and it was actually, it had delayed actually. I kind of trickled through the summer of eighth grade and I did 6 months of freshman year up north. And then I had to make the switch and I moved down south. I missed 60 days in the second semester and they didn't put me in truancy court or whatever. So, you know, but I definitely earned a spot on the very, they called it VIP, the VIP program, you know, for like, you know, teenage pregnancies and the bad kids and,
alternative.
You know, alternative. Yeah. So I was alternative superstar by year 2. But basically, you know, when I had enough of a security where it wasn't just like maximum fight or flight, like on the daily, I just went nuts. I would leave for a couple weeks at a time, you know, tripping on acid, going to raves, like, you know, at 15, you know, just being strung out with a bunch of random strangers in a city, like, okay.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could go wrong? And, you know, and so then basically, I went from those healthy anchors of sports to, you know, just doing drugs, drinking, and just getting crazy. And my personality that made me good at basketball, like that intensity, went into like, what's the bigger rush, you know? And so I played some dangerous games. And, you know, I'm certainly not proud of that, but when you don't know any better, and you don't really see positivity or hope, you just kind of get stuck in that rut. And it's just
Spiral.
like, yeah, I don't want to be coherent. I don't want, it was like, oh, that like nice life thing, like that's for other people, right? The good life, like the quote unquote good life, like that's for other people. And that was basically, for about 2 years of doing that. And then basically at 16, I moved out on my own, started supporting myself, and got a full-time job. And, just kind of out of necessity, it's like, okay, well, here's adulthood, and made choices to do that. I was always a hard worker. Even if I was, 2 hours of sleep, probably still drunk, I worked really hard. So I was able to keep a job. And, never really, graduated high school or anything like that. Just started working. And I would party hard. I would work hard. And then I was in a town in southern Wisconsin, and just like a geographical anomaly. It was in the middle of the triangle of basically the Midwest drug trade from the city of Chicago, the city of Madison, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And this little town, this little border town, was right in the middle of all three of those. So it was just a really strange thing where it's like, I could go to a bar and I could find cocaine quicker than I could find weed.
Wow.
And so, just the access from proximity, I had like family connections that were in biker gangs. And, so basically, gosh, I'm thinking like 18, 19, like, especially like 19, 20 to 22. Okay. I had connections where I was, selling abundance of cocaine, and because you have that much access to it, I became a cocaine addict. And there's a year and a half I was doing probably $3,000 worth of cocaine a week to myself.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Just nuts. Just like, absolute insanity. Like I would work too. I had a full-time job. I'd work 40, 50 hours a week. Oh yeah. You just take a bump at lunch, keep going. What they don't know won't hurt them type of thing. And it's
what
just,
did you do? What was your job?
I detailed cars.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah, totally. I got real focused. I was cleaning carpets and buffing and waxing cars and stuff like that. So I got real focused on that.
Okay.
But it was just a weird thing. Like, a scrawny little white kid was, moving thousands of dollars of cocaine a week, and they made a pit stop into my system, in between there, and I just didn't care. I literally was like, whatever, like, I don't want to live past, 25 anyways. So let's just rip it up.
Well, I think you touched on something earlier where there's the absence of hope, and then you just get into that kind of downward spiral. Or it's just the cycle of numbing. Like, things aren't good, so you are going to go back and try to find that numb spot again. And then you do more bad things, or bad things happen while you are using, and then you do more to make that go away, right?
Yeah. It's, you could definitely put like shame cycle in there.
Exactly.
You feel horrible because of, what you were doing the night before, and just things that like really chip at your self-image.
Sure.
I mean, selling cocaine to people, that are like spending their rent money, and then, they have a family and different things like that,
Yeah.
And just a lot of those things. And it just keeps you in this, like, maybe I'm not a good person. Maybe, so yeah,
That's hard.
yeah, totally. And it's just, like I said, just weird, like the access to it.
Yeah.
It was literally, because it was a small town, it was kind of away from the other cities and stuff like that. It was kind of like there's people that like don't leave the county type of thing, and they're just in that all the time.
I grew up in kind of a border town too, up in Whitefish, which is pretty close to the Canadian border. And I was not in, alcohol was always good enough for me, so I never needed anything else. But I remember how easy it was. Like, everybody in the high school had anything they wanted at any time.
Yeah.
It was just easy. It was not a question of, if you wanted it, you could have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally. And so, I mean, obviously it's like, if you are struggling with addiction, or, know somebody that is, or whatever, like the big things that they talk about is, association, and environment.
Yeah.
And, I think the trouble is people are they would rather choose the awful situation they're in because it's familiar, as opposed to the much better situation that they just don't know about or can't even like mentally get there.
Yeah. I think that's very common in abusive relationships as well. We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And it's like, some of this might sound intelligent because it's like me weaving a thread going backwards. Right. But really, there was somewhere in there like a will to live. It was so low, masked, hidden, or whatever. But there was always something internal with me where I was like, this is my reality, but this is not my reality. I've always had that in the back of my brain. Like, I'm here, but this is not me, and it was basically at my, absolute peak insanity, where it was like I had to have $500 worth of cocaine a day just to maintain a normal life.
Wow.
And, just do all the things. And then I lived in southern Wisconsin, and over the course of a couple years, there was some family friends that lived out in Jackson Hole.
Okay.
And they had it was just a couple. So the gal had kids in our town, and so they would go from Jackson Hole to this place every 6 months. So loosely over the course of a couple years, got to know them a little bit. And they happened to be visiting, and so this was April 2008. They happened to be visiting, and they were just seeing me about 72 hours into my shenanigans. And they were like, wow, you don't look so good. And I was just kind of like,
what do you mean?
And your point is, literally that was kind of my demeanor too. It's like, and your point is what? I just remember like the dude just kind of looked at me, and I like, as high as I was, I remember it just like, he had just like this curious, like, look on his face. And then, about an hour later, like him and his lady were like, we're leaving in 3 days. We think that you should come with us. I think it's a totally new environment. I think it'd be good for you. It seems like you could maybe use a change. And I just was like there was no like, what do you, I didn't like backlash. Right? I was just like, okay. I was like, okay, agreeable. And I was like, well, let me just, go do it somewhere below, and I'll start packing, but in a 3-day swing, I literally like gave away, I had a house that I had rented with a couple other people, and I gave away all my possessions. So I had a beater car that wouldn't have made it out of the county, and I just signed that over to my stepdad. I grabbed a bag of clothes, and I threw away my phone. And I moved I'd never been past Minnesota.
Oh.
Right. And so I drove out to Jackson Hole. I'd been awake for about 2 weeks, and I literally slept and ate for 2 weeks when I got to Jackson Hole. Just detoxing.
Much needed. Yeah.
Yeah. Just detoxing. And it was just like, okay, well, I guess you get a job. Guess that's where you start,
Yeah.
So, it was like within a month I had, like a part-time gig doing chase crew for balloons, hot air balloons. Right. And then a painting company, and I was like low man on the totem pole for a crew of like 7 or 8 that year. And again, like the people who maybe think that they have to get things perfect. I was not perfect, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say, like, thank God there was not good drugs in Jackson Hole, because I wouldn't have been able to bridge the gap. There was at least not good drugs there, so I was just like, well, I'll just drink a little bit and whatever. But again, like, this dude does not have a good relationship with alcohol. Never did. It was never
no,
social.
like, have a beer.
Have 12.
Yeah.
I used to I was 135 pounds, and I used to drink a 30 pack of beer to myself. in an evening. That can't be good for you.
Probably not. Sounds like college, but
yeah, totally. You know, so I always had that. There was that reflex of like, you're not done until you are like hammered,
passed out,
right? Like alcohol will make you pass. So I was like a blackout drinker, and as I was like trying to control my drinking, that got even worse. It was like really scary because I would be really good for 3 weeks, and then I would have some epic blackouts. You know, waking up in the neighbor's bushes. I remember I was drinking moonshine at 10 a.m. at the start of a tubing excursion down the Snake River.
Okay.
I came out of a blackout at about 6 p.m. and I didn't drown.
That's
but like,
good. Yeah.
I was in just shorts, so I didn't have anything else besides just swim trunks on. And I was walking down a sharp gravel, like the old like trestle, right? Like the old, and
train
it just
tracks.
basically, the old train tracks. And it was just a walking pathway at that point. And I came out of a blackout there, and my feet were bloody. And I just like remember being like, town's that way. And so I just like cut in through a yard or whatever. And no joke, search and rescue found me on Harrison Ford's property in Jackson Hole. And I didn't even get to meet him.
Amazing.
Yeah, didn't even get to meet him. But
Okay.
you know, and again, just like goofy. I was like, hey, can I get you to use your phone? And I called my friends. They were at the bar. I was swim trunks, like bloody feet, and I was like, hey, can you drop me off at the wart downtown? And
I need
he's like,
another drink.
yeah, totally, just totally like, yeah, we're just gonna keep going. And he was like, nope, we're taking you home. Yeah, that's where you're gonna go and stay. And you know, so that was like the degree of these crazy blackouts. And then, you know, so that was kind of in the summer of 2009. And then I got a DUI, and just woke up in jail, and I was like, I'm like pretty sure I know why I'm here, but I'm not like 100.
Oof.
You know, but I was like, I know this isn't good.
Yeah.
You know, so I had to spend like a 3-day weekend in jail or whatever. I can't remember what the scenario was, but I was in there for at least over the weekend. You know, basically like took it on the chin. I think I had my painting boss at the time kind of just, you know, helped me stabilize a little bit so I didn't just totally fold out and like, you know, lose my place to live and stuff like that.
Nice.
But you know, so it was basically, that's in the fall, mountain towns, shoulder season, right? Like things kind of die off. And my plan was like, I had already bought a pass for the resort that year. And I was like, I'm going to get more into snowboarding, you know?
Okay.
But then
Seems
it was
like a healthy outlet.
yeah, totally. And you know, so the first year it was like snowboarding and then doing a lot more après stuff. Let's be real. But then, you know, that happened, and I was all by myself. Like all of my family and former friends and stuff like that are back in the Midwest, right? So I only had like a very small, you know, couple of people that I knew. But basically just like even the, you know, connections I made over the first year, it was like, well, I'm probably not going to hang out with that person anymore. I'm probably not going to hang out with that person anymore.
That's good awareness.
Yeah, enough, you know, but it was like, I didn't trust. I was like, I was terrified of myself. I didn't trust myself, because I just like let myself down on like, you're going to change now. You're going to change now. And there I would be. Right.
Yeah.
And you just like have that like, God, you weak piece of, you know, just like that internal talk.
Well, let's lean into that a little bit more, because I have to believe that this has happened to a lot of people in the past. So when you first went there, you said you spent the first couple weeks eating and detoxing. So that was detoxing off of the drugs, but there was still some alcohol happening in there. What was that? I mean, everybody talks about detoxing being terrible and you were super sick and you almost died. Like, was that your experience, or because you had alcohol, maybe it wasn't as terrible?
No,
what did it look like?
I wasn't like drinking a ton and that was like the gentleman that I had first kind of couch surfed with. He was just into smoking some grass.
Okay.
And so that probably assisted in maybe a little bit of a smoother detox.
Okay.
But I've detoxed from heroin cold turkey, and that's just like puking in a bucket for a week, just violently sick.
Ouch.
And I took that one on the chin, and you know, so yeah, it's ugly.
Yeah.
And this is what traps people. You do something to such a sharp degree, you've removed your body's ability to naturally kick out your normal like levity chemicals of happiness, you know, your dopamine, your serotonin. They're totally messed up.
That makes sense.
So you get dry, and you have never felt worse physically, but also mentally, because you're not even, your body's not producing chemicals.
There's nothing that makes you feel good.
Nothing, literally nothing. You know, the only thing, and that's where it's just like, you know, it's like the Ark of the Covenant. It's just like, man, if I just had a rock or like a drink right now, or maybe a joint, like this would all be over.
Okay.
You know, and that's the psychology of it. But it's like, you got to grin and bear it. The physical, like, addiction of something, like the chemical, you know, things, about 3 weeks to a month, loosely. You know, I mean, maybe different drugs are a little bit different on that, but I think that's a loose go by.
Okay.
So for 3 weeks to a month, I mean, don't plan on feeling great about your, you know, path of change and how things are going to be different. It's just take it like one day at a time.
Well, I think that's super important to acknowledge, because I think, you know, we all just assume like once all this crap gets out of my system, I'm going to feel like $1,000,000. And I think it's the opposite of that for a while. So you have to know that the $1,000,000 is on the other side. Like feeling great comes eventually, right?
It does. It does. Yeah.
It takes a while.
It's delayed gratification. Big time.
Okay. Retraining your brain how to like feel good with normal things.
Yeah. And, you know, so I think there's that gap in between. And then, you know, but you got to realize drugs are the ultimate instant gratification.
Right.
And your system is so wired on that. It's not just like the chemical thing, but even after the chemical thing, you're wired that way.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to rewire your brain to understand that, like, now where I'm at, like, I don't really trust like instant gratification fun things. They don't, like, it doesn't have the lasting effect of, you know, taking something where you're like, okay, like building a business or whatever.
Sure.
It's like almost, you know, 2-3 years in, you reach a place where you're like, wow, you know, like I just feel good because I've been doing the right things for the right reason long enough. And it stays, instead of, you know, you do something, you feel
instant
extra awesome, and then you crash lower and, you know, kind of have that cycle. So
super interesting.
Yeah.
So go back to the piece where you were saying that you kept letting yourself down, and then you would feel like you were a loser or whatever. How did you finally break that cycle? Because I'm sure that is a place that a lot of people get tripped up.
And this is, you know, there's a lot of paths to getting there. Mine is really unique. I think, and I wouldn't recommend it, honestly. I don't think but it was my survival mechanism, and it worked for me.
Okay.
So that first winter, I basically, you know, I had kind of enough of a bonus from the year where I could kind of float over. And I think I even, you know, collect unemployment for the winter to just snowboard. And I had already bought a pass to Jackson Hole. And so really that looked like, you know, I had about a month from, you know, getting the DUI to like kind of sinking into the winter.
Okay.
I would snowboard 8 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Whoa.
And then there was a climbing gym, and I would get done snowboarding probably 4 or 5 days a week and go climb for another 4 or 5 hours. So like 6 days a week, exercising 12 hours a day.
Did you get some sort of a dopamine response from that? Was that your new high?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Totally. Yeah, 100%. And I was like, I woke up the next day and I didn't spend my rent money. I didn't have a headache, you know, and I was like, okay, cool. You know, I was doing something where it was like, I tapped back into the athlete. Yeah. And that was exciting.
He was still in there, and that was good.
Yeah, totally. And some of those disciplines that I had built younger in life, I kind of intuitively was like, I can lean into that. You know, because I would remember like when, you know, my dad would have his, you know, alcoholic tirades, I would go out in the middle of winter and shoot hoops when it was 30 degrees.
Sure.
You know, to just have something to hyper focus on when things weren't going well or my mind was swimming. Right.
Yep.
And so, you know, but the reality is I was so shame like social anxiety, didn't trust myself at all.
Sure.
You
'Cause
know,
you get in
so
a party situation
totally,
and what's
like
going to happen?
I literally was a hermit. Like I was just good enough to, make enough connections to go out snowboarding. But after that, it was like, all right, cool. See you at the hill tomorrow, bye, and I would just go isolate and like watch movies or whatever.
Sure.
And yeah, so like 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, exercising and just being like, the mountains are saving my butt right now, and that's all that I can kind of grasp.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's still that way for you, isn't it?
It is an anchor,
Okay.
but I don't need to go in the mountains to like breathe
Okay.
and exist.
Okay.
Like there was a time where I felt more comfortable hanging off the side of a 1,000-foot cliff than I did in like an average social situation at a restaurant or whatever.
Do you think that's because of what you talked about earlier, how like your body just loses its ability to feel those things? And I mean, your body's look like hanging off of a 1,000-foot cliff. You probably feel something.
Oh yeah.
Was that why?
Totally. It was those situations where I put myself, and I know what it is now, when I could put myself into an activity where I finally was like in the moment. It was the only like the first time that I was like doing some crazy mountain snowboarding and then especially rock climbing. I was like, oh my gosh, the noise in my head finally.
Because you had to be super present so you didn't die.
Exactly. Like there was no option but to be exactly in the moment.
Interesting.
And that was my new drug. That's what like guided me through that rough period.
Interesting.
So,
I love it. So I know that you've shared with me in the past that you have brothers that still struggle with some of these issues, right?
Yeah.
And so talk to me about the relationship now with your family. And, I know you and your mom are really tight. So obviously some healing happened there. Do you want to start there?
Yeah, and I guess I could peel the clock back a little bit. Like,
Okay.
and here's the tough part, and other people might encounter this as well. Nobody supported me initially in my decision to want to live, basically.
Sure.
Like, and that's because everybody was kind of in their own things, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like if you are struggling with drugs and alcohol, it's hard for you to have compassion for somebody else who wants to change.
Absolutely. If they change, then you're wrong.
Exactly. So I got a lot of flack and kind of chastised from different family members over the years. And so, I wasn't close with family at all.
Yeah.
And I think it boils down to at the moment that I decided to get sober, what I really decided was like, I am not a victim and it doesn't matter what happened to me when I grew up. I don't care how poorly I was treated by my father, whatever. My life is my fault and it's my responsibility. And I'm going to take all of these things on the chin, because it's like I was in the driver's seat doing those things, literally, figuratively, whereas my two brothers decided to make everything in life was because of what had happened to them. And they are just the professional victims.
Got it.
Right. And I chose to, do the really, really hard things. I didn't take help from anybody. I didn't, lean on anybody. I just did it on my own by myself.
Wow.
And honestly, it was probably just out of pure hatred for who my father was. And I was like, I will never be like that son of a bitch.
Well, I think that's great though, because sometimes it goes one extreme or the other. Like I think people either go, I don't want to be him, or they become them.
And I did both. And I was like, he was good at messing up everything. I was a grand champion. Like if we would have went a few more years, it would have gotten wild.
Wow.
Wilder, and yeah, I was the worst one.
Okay.
Out of all of them.
Interesting.
For a short period of time though.
But it's interesting that you can look back and see that. And it is fascinating to me how, 3 kids from the same family can go through the same things and go different directions completely. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. And, and it's just like, why I would question that. Like, why am I the only one that's like making the choice to change? Like, don't they see like don't they have the clarity, you know? And I'm like, oh no, obviously they don't.
Yeah, and
So
kudos to you for having that, and also to the guy that told you should move to Jackson Hole. Like, sometimes
random.
there's just a random catalyst, I guess, that like breaks that pattern and gets
Yeah.
you out of that cycle. I think what you said about proximity and your community. I mean, we did another episode a couple of weeks ago with a friend of mine who had the alcoholic dad. She was an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
and we talked about her journey a little bit as well. And that was community was one of the biggest things that she talked about, as being able to stay sober, was not going back to those people that were involved in the partying, that were the catalyst to go to the bar, or that had the drugs handy at all times,
Mm-hmm.
and to find more positive people that were on the same path. Did you ever find those people? Or did you just
no,
always
totally,
do it
like,
yourself?
Honestly, it took me the better part of a decade of being, I mean, for 7 years, I climbed 250 days a year.
Wow.
And then, for probably three of those, there's also 100 to 120 days of snowboarding, splitboarding in the Tetons, trips to Alaska. I'd spent a couple winters just like in the desert climbing for 5 months straight.
That's so cool.
And so that was my identity. That was my world. That was my safety. That's where I learned how to conquer fear. That's where I learned to trust myself. And I was doing things that like a small percentage of people ever do.
Yeah, it built your confidence. Like, you
Yep.
can see it when you talk about it. And I think that's something that people in our current, I don't know if you want to say generation or just kind of the state of the world right now, is everybody's trying to make things so easy. But I think getting through the hard things is where you build confidence, like, because you can do it. Like, for you, look at all the shit that you've overcome. And I mean, you got to kind of just know you can do anything if you made it through all of that.
There's literally nothing that ultimately, when I really, really sit and unpack things, because we all have life, we all have challenges, especially if you want a successful, prosperous life, be prepared to get kicked,
100%.
But really, like, at the end of the day, it's like nobody could take away anything from me.
Right.
I could get dropped in a third world country with a paper clip and a pack of bubble gum, and I'm going to freaking own it, and I'm going to win. You know what I mean?
1000% believe that, my friend.
Totally. Right. And that is the benefit of going through and overcoming really hard things, addiction being one of those. So the biggest positive that I would love to put out here for people, if you're part of the 5%, because they talk about, like, loosely, maybe 5% of heavy addicts of one form or another actually recover.
Wow.
Isn't
That's a horrifying statistic.
It's also the same for people who, like, are financially independent. It's kind of a crazy correlation, right? Like,
Yep.
it's the very small percentage of the population that really, really chooses to do the hard things, et cetera.
Yep.
But on the other side of that, if you have, addiction issues and problems to such a sharp degree that it's like, you got to do some serious work on yourself to get through that. You have such a competitive advantage over the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
When it comes to, using all of that same pent up energy and focus and whatever. There's nobody more focused than a drug addict. They'll get theirs, right? But if you can get that and channel that into purposeful, positive things,
Yep.
then you're going to be able to do things that other people aspire or wish they could. But most people would just kind of give up on something
don't have
because
the
it's it's too hard or whatever.
I know that is true for a fact. I am in a mastermind group, and I've talked about it on here several times, but I would bet you a third of that group is sober now for one reason or another. Either it's gone off the deep end, or they've just realized it's not, moving them towards their goals or whatever. But I think there's a whole lot of them that did do the deep end part, that shit went really wrong and they learned to come out the other side. I mean, I know so many like millionaires and even billionaires that were in jail at one point in their life when they were younger, and their decisions were terrible. And somehow they got through that, they changed things, and they're unstoppable because of it. And
Yep.
same thing with ADHD as well.
Mhm.
Like you said, that hyper focus, if you learn how to channel that into a business, or I think elite athlete, I would put in that same category, just like you
100%.
said, like that
Yep.
5% of people that are make it out of addiction or make it super successfully financially, or are elite athletes. Like I
Yep.
think it's all that same like wiring in your brain to just be disciplined and do the hard things that other people aren't willing to do.
Yep. And I call it a success trap because you are wired a certain way if you've been a heavy addict. So it's almost a necessity, I think, that you put yourself in a position to be responsible to other people, to have a greater purpose than yourself, and to do things that are difficult and purposeful, because it keeps you locked into the positive.
Yeah.
Because the minute that you stop the pursuit, then it's so easy for, those past things to come up.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm, fall of 2009, clean from alcohol.
Congrats.
Let's see here. Spring of 2008, clean from cocaine.
Nice.
So 2008, I still will wake up every other month or sporadically, and I don't really typically remember my dreams. I will wake up like in a cold sweat, like hopping up off the pillow, like what the heck, and like be like, where am I? Like
Really?
cocaine dreams, like salivating. Like it's so real, and like I almost think that I'm like in a room doing a bunch of blow with people, and then I wake up and I'm like, what the heck?
Wow.
Okay, so there's some like deep wiring that goes in there.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, thank God. Okay,
Thank God.
that was just a dream, But I think that's important.
Yeah.
If you are stagnant, and you're like the term like dry drunk. If you're stagnant in your sobriety, that's a scary place to be.
I've never heard that term dry drunk before.
Yeah, like you get clean from the substance, but you have not grown
Changed the
through it,
mindset.
transcended. You haven't found a habit that's more positive to replace the negative one that was destroying you.
Or maybe a purpose.
Like somewhere to direct your energy. Call it that, right?
Yep.
You haven't found that, or you stopped doing that, maybe you had a community and you just stopped kind of showing up, and, just like one thing sort of leads to another. And then all of a sudden you're like on this island by yourself. Maybe things aren't going well in your life. It's so easy to relapse even after years.
That makes total sense. Yeah. That does make total sense. Well, let's circle back to your family a little bit and talk about that. I do, kind of want to know about the relationship with your brothers and your mom. And then I do want to talk about your nephew.
Yeah. So I, was always a lot different. I was the middle child. I was all like, at one point, I remember like saying to my mom, I'm like, am I like the mailman's kid, or what's going on here? How come I'm so wildly different than all of you? I was always a lot different than, both of my brothers. The older one was 2 years older. The younger one was 5 years younger. So there's enough of an age gap with the younger one. Wasn't terribly close. Obviously I didn't have good, good brother skills modeled. I had a brother that like beat me up until I was psychotic enough to beat him back.
Okay.
And that was my older brother, so I didn't, the last time I saw him, we just got in a crazy fight, and I was like bashing his head against the gravel, and I was just like, I am never dealing with you again. He was kind of an angry drunk type and a very violent drunk type. And, so I didn't speak to my older brother, and I still don't really speak to him at all, for the better part of 2 decades now.
Wow.
Just because it's unhealthy and toxic, right?
Still using?
Yep. Oh yeah, totally.
time.
Yep. Yeah. And it's super sad because I know what I've done, and it's like, I was in the same place you were.
Yeah.
The younger one, same thing, teenage addiction, and never grew up and grew out of it. I think that they had enough enabling where they were just allowed to exist that way. Neither of them have really held a job in their adult life. They've, been in and out of jail, had kids, never financially or, emotionally responsible for them, and just, professional victims. But I think they were always somehow or another, one relative or another, whatever, soften the fall.
Mm. And I think that's a good thing to note for people out here who are maybe listening, that they have a family member and maybe they're the enablers. Like, that is, you might think you're helping, you might think you're doing a good thing, you might think you're stopping them from the crash landing, but maybe the crash landing needs to happen.
It's a dysfunctional form of love, enabling. And, it's hard, right? Because you see something for somebody that they have zero desire to choose to see for themselves in that current moment. And if you aren't like forced to learn the consequences of your actions and your decisions, and somebody is cushioning that fall from you, well, then you don't get the lesson. And unfortunately, the enabler, without saying this, is saying to that person, I don't believe that you are confident enough to deal with this whatsoever, so I'm just going to do it for you because I don't think you're capable.
That's right.
And then, that person does not have a self-image or confidence, and they're like,
they
I'm
believe
just a
they
screw
can't.
up.
Right. And then they need it.
Yep.
I think it works the same way with money. And this is something that I've been doing a lot of research on right now, because I've got a daughter that's just graduated from high school, and I want to make sure she makes good choices around money. And that's what everybody keeps telling me.
Pivotal time frame for that, getting out, and like the pressures of, do you go to college or all of,
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's what everybody keeps telling me is, when they come to you and they're struggling and they're financially failing, like, you got to let them figure it out themselves, not write the check. Because if they don't, you're telling them that they don't know that you don't believe that they can get through it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do it for them, then they don't ever have that confidence and they don't think you believe in them. So you got to let them figure out a way to make that whatever payment that they need to, that they can't. And this is going to be the hardest shit that I am going to have to do probably in parenting, but I'm committed to it.
No, totally. Right. And you got some excited doggos.
Dogs are excited outside.
Yeah, they're fired up. But so gosh, you just sometimes you just wish things were different, and relationship dynamics were different, are different. But at the end of the day, it's like, I wasn't close with them out of self-preservation for myself. Because here's the thing as well, like, you aren't strong enough to withstand, like, there's a certain amount of negative exposure, especially, predispositions of whether there's, it's alcohol around or drugs or whatever. I don't care how much you've grown. You are not strong enough, and it's like a battery that gets drained. And if you put yourself close enough, in the proximity close enough, you can't withstand that, and you will recoil to your former self.
It makes sense.
And that's the toughest part.
Right.
And again, I've gotten a lot of flack from that over the years. You have. For sure.
But your mom must have made a similar journey. And
she's one of the strongest people that I know. I think a lot of my just, drive, my heart comes from her. She's been through, more in her life than it would have broken 99% of people, you know. And she's kept trucking. She's been through a lot. And is still, going through a lot, and it's kind of dealing with some, stuff right now. But basically, she was like my dad was the angry, abusive alcoholic. And I think as a way of kind of dealing with the trauma and, just like numbing, the craziness, I mean, she had her own struggles with alcohol and stuff like that. And so, for up until 3 years ago, we weren't close.
Oh, really?
No. And, And I think that, she just kind of had to have, her own journey with things.
Sure.
As did I, but then it was kind of, divine appointment, divine intervention. I think that's kind of my story is,
Okay.
there's moments that I can look back and like, I mean, and that's my faith, right? Like of, find what works for you. You got to figure out what you stand on though. What
Yep.
are your values when things go south?
Yeah.
Just people got to iron that out for themselves.
Yeah. And I think faith is one of the things that helps a lot of people get
Mm-hmm.
through it.
Yeah, because it's like, what are you going to do? Self-will all this? That's
Right.
pretty. It's pretty audacious to say.
Yeah.
There's greater forces at work than us. Like you could pretty simply say that.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know what that is, but basically, you anchor into seeing situations that come across your path, and everybody has these, and everybody can say like, wow, like, do you think it's a coincidence that I met this person at this time and then this happened, or this opportunity came up at this time?
Yeah.
Pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah.
Pay close attention to that stuff, because there's some stuff where you're just like, okay, like there's
Yeah.
something to you get a little internal pull.
It's a wink or it's a nod.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
totally. And so 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago, my younger brother and his wife, who were, meth, heroin, anything that they could get their hands on, methadone on an off day, addicts, because it was for like methadone clinics. You could just go in and get your fix for free.
Yep.
Like that. Who thought that was a good idea? Oi. Anyway, in Wisconsin, and I knew, I remember visiting my brother in rehab and just being like, dude, if you don't stay here and if you don't disconnect from the environment up there and our father, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
But what do I know? Right. I was always the, oh, you just think you're better than us. That whole
I think that's
MO.
a common thing.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if wanting to live is considered
Kinda
that, then
is.
I'll
Yeah,
go with it.
kinda
Sure.
is.
I'll
Yep.
roll with that. That's okay. But basically I saw the writing on the wall, like he found another addict, and had this like savior complex with her, but they ended up just using together.
Ouch.
And they had a kid, and that kid 0 to 3, like he was a methadone baby. He almost died and had a detox for a month in the hospital when he was born.
Oh my gosh. That's heartbreaking.
0 to 3, basically, they were full blown addicts. Just crazy stuff like my brother nodding off in a laundromat and leaving his kid there at 2, just stuff like that, where it was just like, this is in me, over here. I'm well over a decade and succeeding. I had finally found, kind of my people. I'd started to really get purpose in my life beyond just being an athlete. I'd made a ton of changes moving from Jackson Hole to Bozeman. And I saw the long, hard years of growth that put me in a place where I was like, gosh, I'm kind of like getting good at this adult thing. I'm almost 40, so 0 to 3 for him was nutty. And then he was like in Green Bay, about 3 hours from where we're from in upper Michigan, Wisconsin. And then they moved up north when my nephew was 3. And at that point, basically they just dropped my nephew off and were just out
with
partying. No, they were with my mom in upper Michigan, right?
Right.
So basically they just were like, boom,
Here you go, Grandma.
Yep. Like, maybe we'll be back next week or whatever.
Oof. Okay.
Right. So from 3, basically my mom has had my nephew full time, full on, from 3 till 5.
Okay.
But then when my nephew was 4, his mom died of an overdose.
Oh.
And at that time, I just said, Mom, if my younger brother is not like strongly encouraged and or maybe put in handcuffs to go to inpatient rehab right now, it's going to go off the rails and it's not going to be good.
Totally.
You know,
That could have been the catalyst for him to stop or go deeper.
Yep. And at that point, he totally bailed on his kid. He bailed on my mom. Went back into, doing drugs. Got with a gal. Had another kid. That kid's in the system, and it has just been, doing drugs and taking advantage of whoever will help him since. And like I just was like, okay, my mom's just here dealing with these things. And she was in her like early 60s at this point.
Okay.
And she like just no help, having a very high energy, high trauma little kid, that just used to have just night terrors like crazy. Just awful stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So a high emotional demand. And I actually think this is what got her to stop drinking.
Oh.
She had no choice. She was like, I have to be here with him.
Functional.
So I think that was a divine appointment as well for
Wow.
her.
Yeah.
But basically, that happened in the summer. And then leading into winter, I saw that my brother had just totally bailed. My mom couldn't financially do it. And emotionally, was wrecked. And I was just like, well, I'm 38, single. And I'm in the middle of building the foundation in 2 different businesses. And this is crazy.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, no, this is crazy. But I'm like, well, I couldn't sit back and be like, well, my mom might go to the funny farm and this kid's definitely going to go into the system.
Yeah.
I already have a 19-year-old nephew that my older brother had and was never financially or emotionally there.
Mm-hmm.
And that kid is 19 or 20 now. And it shows. He is just like such a low self-image, has bailed out on trade schools and colleges and whatever. And like, kind of like works at a fast food joint and, kind of lives at his mom's.
Yeah.
Isolates himself from the world, and so I saw that. So when this came around, it was just like, well, there's a million things that people can't affect in this world. And I think the information age is really revealing on that. And people get these existential crises.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what, like this is going to be really, really difficult, but I can actually influence and control this situation to the positive.
I like that.
Not really knowing, the full extent of it. It was just like, well, things are horrible right now. It's like, well, if you move out here, I can obviously financially help you and help you with him.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how that started. And then, just over the course of like, he came and 6 months later, he started kindergarten out here, so it was like kind of a pretty clean start.
Yeah.
He was young enough and, so just kind of a year and a half, 2 years in, and in the back of my brain, I was like, my brother's not going to get it. He's not going to get it together.
Yeah.
There's zero evidence that he is ever going to change. And as sad as that is, and my mom's like the internal optimist with all of that. And I'm just like, well, I'm sorry, but that's just not life. That's not reality. And in the course of raising him up, when somebody's been through a lot of trauma, especially as a kid, it comes out in their behavior.
Sure.
You don't have to be there to see the after effects of those things. And, there was just some things where I was like, I knew that he had gone through some really awful things.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I am not going to leave this kid's life to chance.
Good for you.
The reality is, at the most optimistic, it would be 5 years before my brother was fit as a human being to even
try to parent.
Yeah, totally. It's like, you can't take care of a goldfish, let alone yourself. Like, you should not be in charge of another human.
Yeah.
And so, I just was like, well, so I had this has got to be my responsibility,
Yeah.
so I kind of, did the messy things of, family dynamics and whatever, but I pushed for, and as of April, legally adopted him.
That's so amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I know that's been a long time coming for you.
Yeah. And it was, it was a really difficult thing to do, but again, there was larger purpose behind what I was doing.
Absolutely.
And it was important.
Yeah.
And so, like figuring out what you're going to fight for if you're trying to get out of a bad situation,
Yeah. Purpose and hope, I think, are
totally
the two things that like you got to figure out where they are, because it's not like you said, it's never going to be a perfect situation. And I think people think that like, okay, it's got to be the perfect time. I got to be exactly ready to get clean. And I just don't think that exists. I think it's like when you think you're going to have a baby, like there's never a perfect time. There's never a perfect time to start a business. At some point, you just have to kind of take that leap and trust in yourself or God or whatever you want to call it.
No, totally. And so, it's just, to me, it's like, it's not an accident, right? Like I overcame a position in life that very, very few people do.
Absolutely.
This stuff is rampant and has totally ravaged my family tree.
Yeah.
And, burned it to the ground, if you will. And you look at that and it's just like, how awful. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm the one charged with putting a new branch on, growing a new limb on that tree. And I am so uniquely qualified to parent my nephew because of, I know to a degree where he's coming from, what he's gone through.
Right.
I've overcome all of that. That's the important part.
Right.
Right. But he's like, it's crazy because he's wired like me, and my brother's totally different, not active, whatever. And he looks more like me than he does my brother too, which is kind of crazy.
It is. Yeah.
And so, I just was like, well, it's, some things are just meant to be.
Yeah.
And, it's like, I wish things were different, for him. And, almost on the daily, he has to be faced with the fact that, the kids are like, where's your mom? Oh, my mom's dead.
Yeah.
Like, as a little kid having to say that.
That sucks. Yeah. How'd your mom die?
Right. Yeah, totally. Well, and it's just like kids are totally innocent, they're like, yeah, it's like you're really hitting a nerve.
Yeah.
But it's been totally imperfect. It's been really difficult, but like 3 years in, when you're like, okay, I chose to do some really difficult things, and stand on principle when, other people aren't, and things like that.
Yeah.
But like, I'm in probably one of the most adverse, chaotic years of my life.
For sure.
But I'm handling it better than I've handled less adverse situations.
Well, I think that really is a sign that of like the progress that you've made, and that should just further boost your confidence. And I am a big believer that like right before you're about to take that big leap into the next thing, that's when life kind of punches you in the face, like you said, to make sure you're ready for that next stage. And I think that's how a lot of people get filtered out. That's why there's the 5% situation, right? Because most people get that punch in the face right when they're about to take a big leap, and they go back down, and they go back to where they were. They go back to the comfort. And to be fair, our brains are hardwired to stay in what they know, to stay in that comfortable place. Even if it's a bad place, it's still what you know, which equals comfort for it. So to break free from that is a big deal, but doing that is what takes you to the next level, no matter what we're talking about in your health, in your business, in your personal life, in your emotional. You use the word emotional intelligence a lot, the phrase, and I definitely see that when I talk to you. I think you're one of the most emotionally intelligent men that I know, because of what you've been through. And like you said earlier, you're uniquely qualified to parent him. I also think you're uniquely qualified just in general as a friend, probably as a spouse someday for somebody, that you're going to understand people in a different way than 95% of the population ever can. That's really special.
Yeah. And again, I'm grateful for that ability now. The path to getting that is not that awesome.
Maybe not the one you would have chose,
but I use that, and I'm able to, and I coach people, right?
Yeah.
I have a network marketing e-commerce business, and I, directly and indirectly coach a team of 30 people.
Yeah.
And most of that looks like helping people to win in their minds and in their lives, so that they can go do simpler things like put a business together, and whatever that is, because mostly it's the psychology of things.
Totally. And
I can speak to somebody because I've done the silliest, goofiest, like craziest things, and I'm like, somebody would, I can sense like the anger, the frustration, the shame in somebody. And I can just kind of be like, I can give them permission where it's just like, oh yeah, well, at least you didn't do this,
right?
Things like that. But I use those things that have built me to help and to give back and to add value. That's why I'm an entrepreneur.
Right. And I love that, because I think there's a lot of people in that situation where they go the opposite. They don't trust people. They don't want to let anybody else in. And I see that in you. You're an easy person to talk to, and I can definitely see how you can add a lot of value for people, because whether it's addiction or something, or abusive relationships, or something completely different, like, I think you understand what humans go through and how you overcome that. And I have a feeling you don't have a lot of tolerance for excuses.
It's it's tough. It's tough because, and that's another thing that is a superpower. What most people, especially in the age we live in, a little sharp and soft, just saying. When I look at somebody and they're exclaiming their problems, I'm like, that's it? Really?
That's what you got?
And I've developed a unique ability just over time to be very empathetic, but also to just like, that's not a good excuse.
Yeah. Somebody told me once, if all your problems can be solved by money, you don't have any problems.
Yeah.
And I think that that's exactly it. Like, our privilege shows sometimes around like, oh,
totally.
That's my problem today.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And if you still have problems, if you have more resources to buy back some time, you can spend some time on fixing those things. So at the end of it, like, get your financial future in order too. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Is there any other final notes that you have that you want to leave for maybe somebody who's either thinking about trying to get clean and sober, or maybe somebody who has a family member that they'd like to help?
Yeah. If it's you, it's got to start with you. I had the misfortune or whatever to be totally alone in that. And I had to make a decision that, like, me, myself, and I, for me, with no outside support, I want to live.
Yeah. Nobody's coming to save you.
Nobody's coming to save me. Everything is my fault. Take that ownership, take ownership. It's like, it doesn't matter what's happened to you. And a lot of it's tragic, and a lot of it you didn't choose. But everything in your life is your fault. It doesn't matter. Success and prosperity do not care about the validity of your circumstances in your past. So taking 100% ownership and just being like, I can't control what happens to me, but I can control how I respond and how I start to move from here. You need to check your environments and your association. And I don't care if that's your best buddy from, middle school. If he's toxic and doesn't support, you wanting to grow beyond where you're at, if you're in a bad situation, then that's just not a good friend.
Yeah.
And at least until you have enough strength where you can be around that person and not be emotionally affected.
Yeah. I love the extreme ownership. And I feel like, I'm guessing there's some people out there that when they hear you say everything is your fault, that feels a little bit harsh. But I think it's actually good news that everything's your fault, because that means you have control going forward. You get to have that. And it's not anybody else that gets to change that path. It's literally on your shoulders, which is scary, but good.
Well, again, it gives you something to do.
Yeah.
Because you're like, wow, now I'm clear enough to like be aware of all my problems. And now I've got a lot to
now
fix.
I got my real problems.
Yeah, I got a lot to fix here. We got a whole laundry list, so I'll be busy. Like it's good. Yeah.
No, I think that is good, and busy is good. I think, like you said, if you're, what was your term? Dry drunk.
Dry drunk.
That if you're just like,
Yeah.
you know, just kind of sitting there, and maybe you're not drinking, but you still don't have that purpose. You still don't have that hope. Like you're still not moving into that happy place that, you know, you're still thinking it's for other people, not for you.
Yeah.
So I think great advice there. Take the ownership, step up, do it your way. Know that you're in control of it, but ask for help. Or
I definitely think so. This is such a far-reaching thing. You know somebody in your sphere of influence that has been negatively affected by addiction.
100%.
So, you know, it's reaching out and having those conversations. You know, if you do have anybody in your life that, you know, you trust and it is a confidant and you feel like it's going to give you good advice, you know, then at least start there. Right.
Or I mean, there's entire organizations built around trying to support people like this, and
totally.
or AA or
and
NA
Ashley was great about kind of, you know, shouting that stuff out.
Yep.
100%. And I do think that it took me a decade of being a crazy adventure athlete, like isolating, to be like, oh, this human race thing, like people.
I should get to know some.
Yeah. Like, what, you just like sit down and talk to people? Is that what you do?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Now you're great at it.
Yeah. What is it these normal people do? I don't know. I'll figure that out though.
Yeah.
But yeah, finding some positive community somehow or another. There's so many different outlets for that. Whatever works for you. And I think, you know, if you're not the person and you know the person, don't be the enabler.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, that is such a painful emotional cycle.
Yeah.
And you're not helping. You really aren't. And that's the reality. Is like people need to have the hard fall sometimes. And and you know, it's like, what is it? They feel like a butterfly doesn't crack their way out. They just die. Right.
There you go.
Type of thing.
I haven't never thought of it that way as an analogy, but that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. Caterpillar. Yeah, I think that's it. Caterpillar to butterfly. Right?
Right, exactly. Right? Yeah. If they just stay in there, they just die.
If they don't
become the butterfly.
If they don't figure out that process of breaking that cocoon themselves, they if somebody
cut it open,
they would die.
Right.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point. Well, thank you, Tyler. I'm so proud of you for sharing your journey. I'm proud of all the things that you've done, and I know that you're going to inspire a lot of people. And I know your nephew's in great hands, and I'm sure that it will be a long journey for you guys to work through all these things together, because parenting is the hardest and best thing ever.
Yep.
But I agree with you that you're uniquely qualified to really help him through the things that he's got coming up at him. And so if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You know, I mean, I have a painting business here in town, and you know, I love serving people through that. So Instagram, Facebook, trying to, you know, build that up a little bit more.
Inspired painting.
Yep, inspired painting.
Okay.
But you know, other than that, like, I'm around. I'm a part of this community, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I love building relationships and engaging with people everywhere. So yeah, you know, happen to see me, just drop a line. Definitely. It's funny. I went from like hating the human race to like, I love people.
Yeah. You're a great connector.
You know, and I love connecting with people and just trying to add value and, you know, make people feel valued, because there's not enough people that do that.
You know what? That's an excellent point. I think you're right. I think not enough people try to make other people feel good and feel valued. And we all want to feel that way. Mm-hmm. So I acknowledge that you do that. So if this has been helpful for you, please like, share, subscribe. If you know somebody that you think could benefit from this, please send it on to them. And stay tuned for our next episode. And here's to empowering each other one story at a time.